Imagine London at the beginning of the 20th century. The streets are bustling. The air smells of coal and rain. Amidst this hustle and bustle walks a young man, Hans Wilsdorf. He is only 24, a stranger in a strange land, without money or support. He has only one thing, a dream. He wants to create a watch that will change the world. Not a pocket watch, but a wristwatch. Accurate, beautiful, reliable. But it sounded strange at the time. Wristwatches were considered a feminine accessory, not a masculine attribute. People laughed at the idea, and yet Hans saw the future in it. Imagine a small room above a shop in London. A wooden table, drawings on the wall, the dim light of a lamp. There he would sit at night, writing down ideas, searching for a way forward. In 1905, together with his partner Alfred Davis, he founded the company. The name was not yet a big deal, but in Hans's heart, it was already history. He wanted to come up with a word that was short, strong, and universal. Legend has it that one morning he was riding an omnibus and heard the whisper of ROLEX in his head. Thus was born the name that would become a symbol of precision and style. He had no guarantees then. He was a young immigrant among experienced competitors, with a handful of drawings and a belief in a strange idea. But that's how stories begin that change the world. And perhaps his strength was not only in talent, but also in his past. He lost his parents early, grew up without support. He knew the value of every minute. And that is why he decided to give people a different way of experiencing time. Thus began the journey of ROLEX. From a small room, from a dream that seemed ridiculous, and from the belief that the future belongs to those who are not afraid to be different. Every great story begins not with victories, but with doubts. For ROLEX, the early years were exactly that. Imagine that you come up with an idea that you believe in with all your heart. You show it to people and they laugh. That was the case with Wilsdorf. He said, "The wristwatch will be the future," and all he heard around him was, "It's a woman's game." Real men were pocket watches. And this was the first big wall. The world is not ready. The market is closed. And even the best words do not change anything. Because people believe not in words, but in facts. Hans worked at night, perfecting the mechanisms, seeking accuracy. But even here he encountered problems. The first models were fragile. Humidity, dust, shocks. All this broke the delicate mechanisms. Customers returned the watches. Partners lost faith. And there was a moment when it seemed everything could end before it even began. Imagine the scene. Late evening, in a workshop. On the table is a pile of disassembled watches. Against the wall is a stack of letters with complaints. Hans sits in silence, his hands greasy from the mechanisms. And in his head is only one question. Maybe they are right? Maybe I am really going the wrong way. It was the first moment when he could have given up. But it is moments like these that distinguish those who make history from those who remain in the shadows. And then time came to the rescue. World War I. It would seem that it was a catastrophe for Europe. But it was she who changed everything. Soldiers could not get out their pocket watches under fire. They needed a quick, convenient way to check the time. And here the wristwatch became not a luxury, but a necessity. This moment can be imagined as a sharp turn. Yesterday the idea was laughed at, and today it saves lives. The wristwatch becomes a symbol of practicality and courage. And with it, Hans has a chance. But the war brought more than just demand. It brought a production crisis. Supply chains were breaking, money was running out. The company was teetering on the edge of survival. There were days when he didn't know if he would be able to pay salaries or collect the next batch. Everyone was talking about the risk of closure. And it was then that the trait that would later become the heart of ROLEX emerged: stubbornness. Wilsdorf searched for suppliers in different countries, personally negotiated, wrote letters day and night. He understood that if he could survive now, he would prove that his idea was worth the future. Imagine the scene, 1918. The war is coming to an end. London is still recovering from the devastation. And Wilsdorf sits in his office, reading letters from the military. They thank him for the watches. They write that the Rolex has withstood the trenches, the dirt, the cold, the blows. And then he understands. Yes, this is not yet a victory, but it is already proof. Proof that the world is gradually beginning to believe in his dream. But with that comes another challenge. In the 1920s, he loses his wife. A personal tragedy that could break anyone. The pain was so deep that many in his place would have abandoned everything. But Hans did something different. He decided to turn personal pain into strength. He created a foundation and rewrote the company so that Rolex belonged not to the shareholders, but to the idea itself, so that no personal tragedy could destroy what he had built. And here we see the main lesson of these years. A crisis is not the end. It is a test of your idea, your faith, your endurance. Because true success does not come easily. It is always born where there is pain, doubt, and fear. For Rolex, the first crises became the foundation. They showed that laughter and distrust are just the beginning. And if you can withstand the blows, one day those blows will make you stronger. Thus ended the first difficult stage. There were new discoveries, new risks ahead. But even then it became clear, Rolex would not just survive. It would grow out of crises the way a tree grows out of a storm. Even stronger, even taller, even more visible to everyone. After the first crises, there comes a moment when you either give up or find the strength to do something game-changing. For Rolex, that moment came in 1926, the year the world first heard a word that would change the watch industry forever: oyster. Picture the scene. An ordinary showroom full of people looking at watches behind glass cases. Some admire the gold cases, others discuss the intricate mechanisms. And in the middle of it all, a small stand holds something new. A watch that looks ordinary but hides a secret. It was the world's first waterproof wristwatch. Before that, watches were afraid of water, dust, and shocks. A drop of rain or an accidental fall was enough to break the mechanism. But the oyster had a sealed case that protected it from everything. People looked and couldn't believe it. Is that really true? How is that possible? Hans understood. One word is not enough. The world must see proof. And then he took a risky step. He found a woman, Mercedes Gleitze, an athlete who was going to swim across the English Channel. A Rolex oyster was put on her hand. And imagine this moment. Cold water, fog, waves hitting her body, hours of struggle, and a watch shining on her wrist. When she came ashore, wet, exhausted, but with victory in her eyes, the watch was still working perfectly. It was a triumph. Proof that Rolex is not just a decoration, but a symbol of reliability. Headlines were in the papers, people were talking, and the brand was getting its first real recognition. What had been laughed at a few years earlier was now something to be admired. It was a turning point. But Wilsdorf did not stop there. He understood that to conquer the world, you need not just to make watches, but to create stories. And he began to create legends. Rolex appeared on the hands of climbers who climbed mountains, pilots who covered long distances, people who tested the limits of the possible. And every time this watch stood where others broke. Imagine what it was like. Somewhere in the high Alps, with snow crunching underfoot and wind cutting your face, a man looks at his Rolex to see how far he is from the summit. Somewhere in a plane, with the engines roaring, a pilot looks at the dial to check his course. In those moments, the Rolex became not an accessory, but part of the victory. And that was the main step forward. Hans wasn't just selling watches. He was selling a dream. And that dream was very simple. Your time is in safe hands. Every year, the oyster became a symbol. People who wanted to prove to themselves and the world that they were capable of more chose Rolex. Because it wasn't about gold or status. It was about the confidence that in the most difficult moment your watch would stand with you. And here another lesson is born. In a world where everyone argues with words, the one who shows the result wins. Because proof is stronger than any speeches. And it is thanks to this that Rolex took the first steps towards becoming more than a company. It became a symbol of faith in the possible. What had started in a small room above a shop was now creating a product that would become a legend. And a great transformation lay ahead. A moment when Rolex was no longer just struggling to survive, but was beginning to dictate the rules of the game. As the world plunged into the darkness of World War II, Rolex watches found themselves in the midst of history. They were worn by pilots, soldiers, doctors, diplomats, people for whom time meant life. Hans Wilsdorf understood that during these years the brand could not simply remain a symbol of luxury. It had to become a symbol of reliability and endurance. It was then that Rolex revealed its true essence. During the war, British officers held in concentration camps could order Rolex watches directly from Wilsdorf without prepayment. He knew they couldn't pay, but he also knew they would survive, and when the time came, they would pay. This wasn't a business move. It was an act of trust and faith in humanity. And it was this gesture that transformed Rolex from a simple company into a legend. As the world began to rebuild after the war, Rolex had already established a reputation as a brand that stood by people even in the darkest of times. People told stories of their watches ticking away in the damp trenches, during underwater missions, and even in captivity. It was a time when Rolex was no longer just an accessory. It became a friend, a witness, a part of history. And that was when the moment of bold decisions came. In 1953, the company released the Submariner, the first watch capable of withstanding the depths of the ocean. It was a challenge to the world. Rolex was not afraid of either heights or depths. In the same decade, the Explorer was born, accompanying the expedition to Everest. This was not marketing, but proof that their watches really could withstand the limits of human capabilities. Each new model was not just a product, but a response to the challenges of the era. Divers, pilots, mountaineers, they all found in Rolex a tool that never failed. And people began to believe, if you wear Rolex, then you can conquer any peak. But the real turning point came not only in technology, but also in perception. Rolex began to be associated with victory. It was a symbol that you don't just live, you win. You win circumstances, doubts, fear. And that's what made Rolex so fascinating. It didn't sell time. It sold self-confidence. By the late 1950s, Rolex was more than just a watch company. It was an idea that lived in the minds of millions. If you wear a Rolex, you are always ready for the next challenge. And it was this idea that made them a brand that began to transcend the industry. It was a turning point when Rolex became not just a witness to events, but also a part of human history. And there were new peaks, new challenges, new legends ahead. The world was changing, and Rolex was changing with it. The 1960s and 1970s were decades of great challenges and great achievements. The world was discovering the oceans, the mountain peaks, and the vastness of space, and Rolex walked alongside those who aspired to more. Imagine a bathyscaphe descending into the abyss of the Mariana Trench. The sea is quiet, deep, darkness swallows the light. In the cockpit, a Rolex Oyster Perpetual watch quietly measures the time. And then comes a moment of triumph. The watch has withstood pressure that seemed fatal to any mechanism. This test was not advertising. It was proof. Proof that Wilsdorf's dream had become a reality. That Rolex now stands for reliability where others give up. Or imagine the cold peaks of Everest. Climbers go to the limits of human capabilities. The wind tears at their faces, their hearts beat fast, and on their wrists is the Explorer. This watch measures every minute of the climb, every step to the top. Rolex has become a symbol of victory over circumstances, a symbol of the impossible being possible. Meanwhile, the brand conquered culture. In cinema, sports, diplomacy, Rolex appeared where people sought to demonstrate success, endurance, and style. James Bond, a movie hero and a symbol of courage, wore it on his hand. Athletes who set records chose Rolex because it withstood the load and remained the standard of accuracy. Each such moment added weight to the legend, made the brand desirable all over the world. But the breakthrough was not easy. The quartz boom of the 1970s threatened the Swiss watch industry. Cheap Japanese electronic models were taking over the market. Many companies almost disappeared. But Rolex stood firm. They did not betray their principles. They remained true to mechanics, quality, and tradition. It was a risk. It was a moment when the brand could either fall or rise even higher. And it rose. The secret was in the ability to turn crisis into fuel. They didn't chase mass. They did what they do best: create timeless, elegant, flawless watches. Every piece they released said, "We're here to stay." And the world reciprocated. Rolex became desirable. Rolex became a legend. Imagine a modern auction where people fight over rare models. Every watch has a story of how it has stood the test of time. And that story began in a small room in London, where a young Hans Wilsdorf dreamed of a wristwatch. From small beginnings to a global icon, this is how a legend is formed. It was the moment when Rolex finally transformed from a company into a phenomenon. The world began to see the brand not just as a mechanism for measuring time, but as a symbol of confidence, status, and triumph over circumstance. A story that began in a small room and humble drawings now inspired people around the world to aspire to more. And here comes the main lesson of this part. To achieve a global breakthrough, you need to not just create a product, but create a legend. A legend that speaks for itself. A legend that stands the test of time, oceans, mountains, and human doubts. And Rolex knows how to do it like no other. The world is changing incredibly fast. And for a brand that has been around for over a century, that means one thing. Either you keep up with the times, or you risk being left behind. For Rolex, the 1970s were a test that could have shattered even the strongest reputation. Imagine, Japanese quartz watches appear on the market like a wave. They are cheaper, more accurate, mass-produced. People start saying, "Why pay so much for mechanics if electronics do everything better?" It was a moment of doubt for all Swiss craftsmen. Many companies went bankrupt, factories closed, and Rolex was faced with a choice: follow fashion or remain itself. And they remained themselves. Imagine a meeting at the headquarters. The craftsmen are focused, the managers are discussing risks, the atmosphere is tense. Someone suggests switching to mass production of electronics. Hans, although not from the first days of the brand's life, understands one thing: we cannot lose our essence. They decide to focus on quality, on mechanics, on what makes them unique. It was a risk. Big money could be made quickly, but it would mean betraying everything that had been built over decades. And Rolex chooses a different path, slowly but surely raising the bar of perfection, creating limited editions, putting its soul into each watch. Imagine a workshop in 1975. The air smells of oil and metal. Masters sit over mechanisms, checking accuracy, polishing cases. Every movement is a testament to the brand's belief in its mission. And it is thanks to this dedication that Rolex has survived and strengthened its status. But today's challenges are not only about competition. They are also about technologies that are changing the way people live. Smartphones, electronics, the internet. It seems that time no longer belongs to mechanics. And Rolex is once again faced with a choice: either succumb to the new wave or find a way to keep its spirit alive. The answer was simple but bold. Rolex did not try to become electronic. It remained what it always was: a symbol of endurance, reliability, and prestige. And people understood this. A modern Rolex is not just a watch. It is a sign that you value quality, tradition, and self-confidence. Imagine how collectors compete for rare models at auctions today, how athletes and businessmen wear Rolex to important events, how people look at the dial and feel confident. It is a symbol that has stood the test not only of oceans and mountains, but also of time, technology, and trends. The main lesson of this part: the true strength of a brand is in being true to its vision. When the world changes, you can panic or adapt, but Rolex has proven that even in a crisis, you can turn a threat into even greater value. Modern challenges have shown one thing. Success is not only about victories, but also about choices, about principles, about being ready to stand up for what you have even when it would be easier to give up. And Rolex has learned this lesson forever. Today, Rolex is more than a brand. It is a symbol of dreams, faith in one's own strength, and the power of the human spirit. When you see a watch on your wrist, you see not only metal and mechanism, but the history of a century, decades of struggle, the first crises, triumphs, and bold decisions. Each copy is a memory of people who went forward, did not give up, and did not succumb to fear. Imagine a modern Rolex showroom. Light softly reflects off the polished metal. Craftsmen carefully polish each case, checking for accuracy down to the second. There is no rush, no compromise. Every movement speaks of perfection, of a legacy passed down from generation to generation. But today's world poses new challenges. People want technology, innovation, quick solutions. Competitors offer cheaper, smarter watches. And Rolex is faced with a choice: follow fashion or remain itself. And it chooses the latter. Because true strength is not in pleasing every trend, but in preserving its face, its values, and its uniqueness. And it inspires. When you see a Rolex watch on the hand of an athlete, an entrepreneur, an explorer, you understand. It's not about wealth or status. It's about being ready to take responsibility, moving forward, and not being afraid of challenges. Every minute that Rolex measures becomes a symbol of courage and determination. In the future, Rolex will continue to set the bar. The company invests in new technologies while preserving traditions, broadens horizons, supports those who strive to achieve the impossible. They know the present is important, but without the roots of the past, the future is impossible. And here it is important to understand the main lesson. True success is a combination of the past, present, and future. Starting from a small room in London, with the dream of one boy, Rolex has gone through crises, uncertainties, personal tragedies, technological challenges, and world wars. And each such moment has made the brand stronger. Today, anyone who looks at Rolex can learn a lesson. Start small, but dream big. Value quality above all else. Adapt quickly to change. Turn crisis into fuel for growth. Lead, don't follow. And even in a world of constant change, you'll stay on top. And here is the last image. You are holding a watch in your hands that measures the minutes of your life. It reminds you that time is not just seconds and hours. It is a choice, determination, and belief in yourself. This story is not just about Rolex. It is about each of us. Because true success is the courage to move forward, change, and overcome any obstacles without betraying yourself. And if you remember one thing, let it be this: a small dream today can become a legend tomorrow if you believe, work, and are not afraid to be different.